the new edition of Nuke, which came out in April, I think it was on April 22nd of this year, is a topic of discussion at the moment, and I actually think I can sum it up like this. I think this new version of Nuke has been a waste of time in pretty much all respects. People don't want to play it. When it is played, it's not very good, and it removed a good map from the map pool, and so it's only actually had, so far, a net negative impact on the game, the competitive game that is, as far as I'm concerned. So, first and foremost, if we look at why this map's bad, and then look at the concept of adding new maps, how you add new maps, and what can be done differently. Because obviously it's been something that's been a trend in CSGO over the history of the game. So first and foremost, one of the most damning qualities against the map Nuke is no team in the world who is a top team, like no team as far as I'm aware, in the top 15 in the entire world of teams, mains Nuke, picks Nuke as their home map, picks it with any regularity. I do not know a team who has Nuke as their main in this sense. Now this in itself is incredibly telling, because the whole great thing about Counter-Strike is even if a map wasn't loved, if teams really thought they could get a competitive edge by being the best Nuke team, the team that picks Nuke all the time as their home map, playing into the weaknesses of others on Nuke and forcing a Nuke map ban every time, there would be teams who would pick this. In fact, teams like an Astralis or a Na'Vi or a Virtus Pro, teams with famously deep map pools, would absolutely pick it regularly to go with it. But let's keep on this first point. No team in the world mains this map. I've never seen that actually happen in terms of a really good map before. I think the only one that's comparable that I could say shares some similarities would be Overpass. There have been very few teams who ever mained Overpass. There might have been periods in time when teams like Na'Vi or Astralis, then TSM, Team Question Mark, all that stuff, might have mained it for a little while. Admittedly, it's very rare people mained Overpass, but even so, at least teams did play it. At least it was played in that sense, which leads to the second point. So few teams, top teams, want to play Nuke. Now, that's not just because it's a new map. As I said, it came out on the 22nd of April. That was ages ago. It's not like they haven't played the map in competition. Almost every team now has played it in competition. Fnatic, interestingly, hasn't. Most teams have obviously played it in practice as well. Na'Vi, Team Liquid, all these other pros were practicing it privately. Virtus Pro. So it's not that teams haven't played it either and that they're just scared of change. They just don't like it and they don't even want to play it. Teams so often will veto Nuke. This is a really telling point. Even if the opponent is famously not good on Nuke, doesn't pick Nuke, has shown no history of picking Nuke, and isn't as a result a threat to pick Nuke. So what that tells you is teams themselves who don't like Nuke hate the map so much, they just want to 100% guarantee it is not available for the first two maps if it's a random deciding scenario. Well, obviously that's not the case anyway if you remove it. They want to 100% guarantee it's not included in the first two maps, because obviously you have two ban rotations in the normal pick ban, that they will just outright ban it and say, I'd rather be more comfortable playing any other map, even my worst map, rather than play this Nuke map. So now teams are even saying, I'd rather play my fucking permaban than play Nuke. That's amazing that you see that on such a widespread level at the top pro level. And often, as a result, it's fucked with vetoes, in as much as now it's become a case where teams, whoever the first team is, might have to risk banning Nuke if they don't want to play it, and most people don't want to play it. Therefore, the second team, if they were going to ban Nuke, now gets to just ban something else. So it fucks up vetoes in that sense as well, and provides a weird competitive advantage just based on who goes first in the pick ban, which shouldn't exist unless you both have the same permaban. Now, if you want to know some stats for this, I looked up the stats of how often a Nuke was picked and banned at ESL1 Cologne, because interestingly enough, that was the first major to use Nuke, but we'd already had Nuke existing for E-League, for example. Teams had played it there, teams had banned it there. So it's not like teams didn't have time to get used to it. Remember, Cologne took place in early July. So we're talking about more than 2 months after the release of the map. Almost 2.5 months after the release of the map. And teams still didn't want to pick it. And here's the kind of stats that they had. In the group stage, in 20 opportunities for it to be picked, as in picked outright, 20 opportunities for it to be banned, rather, it was only banned, let's see, 17 out of the 20 times. There was only 3 times where a team in the group stage didn't choose to ban it. In the quarterfinals, it was removed twice, it was picked twice. In the semi-finals, it was removed once, it was picked once. In the final, it wasn't banned or picked, it would have been the decider. So, out of 27 possible times where this map could be banned, it was banned 20 of the 27 times. That just shows no one likes this map, no one wants to play it. It was only picked 3 times out of the 7 playoff series where it was possible to be picked. Now, interestingly enough, that is actually reminiscent, not even quite as bad though, as when Cobblestone was first introduced, which was actually introduced at the major, ESL 1 Cologne 2014, along with Overpass, and the random map decider was brought in. And interestingly enough, yes, we saw Cobblestone a bit from the random map decider, but that was only picked once in that entire tournament in the final, which was the Fnatic versus NIP final, and NIP won it 16-14. Now then, the problem with the fact that no one mains it, no one wants to play it, people veto it so frequently, is that the map being removed was Inferno. And Inferno was frequently selected by a number of top teams. It was the home map for a number of top teams historically. There was times in history where Fnatic loved it. You obviously had people, depending on the opponent, I guess you could say at certain times Envious had it as a home map because people often banned DOS 2 against them. You had a number of teams who liked it. The guys from iBuyPower. There was many teams liked this map. Many teams could play it. Almost every team could play it, essentially. And no one, pretty much, in general, had it as their worst map or had it as a permaban map. Think of people like Na'Vi. The reason why you saw Na'Vi play Inferno so much is it was their second worst map. So they could play it, they could even get wins on it, like beating Astralis at Columbus in the semi-final. But people would pick it against them. But Na'Vi themselves would never ban it themselves often because they had their own permaban and they were at least willing to play it. In contrast, people don't pick Nuke, even against the teams that, as I've said, are bad and are afraid of it themselves. And finally, let's just add in, there were practically no teams that permabanned Inferno. That's telling in itself, in my opinion. So as a result, to me, Nuke has just become this map where if you're first in the map pool, pick ban, unlucky for you, you probably have to be the team that bans it. Other teams, in theory, can play chicken with it and make teams scared that they're going to pick it, but since most people actually aren't good at it, I think that only works because of the mentality of current pros. If they actually sat down and thought about it, if I was an analyst, I'd tell most of these teams, don't worry about it, like, except for like 2 or 3 teams in the world. So, for example, Team Liquid actually probably would pick it in certain times just because they know you can't play it if you leave it up. And a team like Flipside, as we saw at the major, might pick it every now and then. A VP maybe is an outlier, but even they got spanked on it. I think in general what you've seen from this is that actually most teams aren't really even playing chicken with it. They're just giving you that impression and they wouldn't dare pick it themselves and waste what could be a good pick for themselves. So I actually think it could be even less viable as a ban even right now. And it could always be second rotation ban and just never played. If that would be the ultimate way to show how little people care, if teams actually followed my advice on that. I also think if you want to look at the map, not only do people not main it, not want to play it, veto it all the time, but then when it has been picked, there haven't really been many good games on it. I mean, you look at the games that were in E-League, those were all terrible, all those games on it. There was the game that Team Liquid played against G2 at ECS. That was just G2 winning with like a standard-looking nuke. Wasn't anything special. Then we had at the major in the playoffs, Flipside picked against SK as a tricky pick. Now this one was hardly a great game, even though it was actually an overtime game. It was just a good curveball pick by Flipside, thinking that the guys from SK wouldn't be super prepared on this map. Na'Vi versus Team Liquid in the other quarterfinal, I'll give that credit. That was a legitimately good game, one of the only good games I've seen on Nuke, and actually won Team Liquid the series. VP against SK in the semi-final was a fucking train wreck of a game. SK just destroyed VP. VP picked it, yet had no seemingly competitive knowledge of how to play the map, and it arguably cost VP that semi-final and a potential chance to win the major. Inferno, on the other hand, was incredible from day one. Give Inferno a few months in the history of CSGO, and it was fantastic. Always great games, great maps. We remember all the games that the Very Games guys played on it. We remember coming into the Fnatic, LDLC. There was always fantastic games on Inferno. Easily one of the best competitive maps we've ever had in CSGO history. Now, what are some of the issues that we've had with Nuke in CSGO? Well, first of all, in this new rework of Nuke, it was already a problem, I thought, in the old version of Nuke. And Nuke, the old version definitely had its issues. I just thought at the time, without knowing how good Train would be, that I thought it was the better map. Now, in terms of the issues that CSGO has, one area that it's very different to 1.6 is directional sound is so important on Nuke. and in both versions of CS. But in 1.6, it has fantastic surround sound in that game, where you can pinpoint exactly where an enemy is and visualize him in your mind. CSGO, I've played this game for years now. I talk to top pros who play it every day of their life. The sound is still terrible in this game. Being able to tell sometimes if someone's above you or below you, being able to tell if they're close or far. There's not really a same sort of linear drop-off, it seems, in the way the sound works to where you can hear where they are across the map. Funnily enough, this isn't something to do with, like, some difficulty in coding either, because this is like modern technology that's failing where old technology was better. Famously, a game Quake 2 with really good surround sound in that game, you could hear people everywhere on the map. You could hear exactly where they were and by what they picked up where they were. Quake 2 came out in like 1998 or something crazy, by the way, guys, or 1997. So the fact that CSGO in 2016 doesn't have decent directional sound is terrible, but it's especially emphasized on this map because it's all about where the person is, the height of them, what object they're behind. And since you can't spam walls randomly either like you could in 1.6, now you need to know even more where they are. It's a nightmare in this game. It's still CT-sided as a map. Doesn't matter what they've done to change it. And part of the reason I think this is an issue is because when Valve tries to change something, thinking in themselves, I specifically want it to work for the terrorist side. Well, how? We don't know what qualities make something work for a terrorist side. We don't know what ends up giving CTs an advantage. And as a result, you've seen routinely things that were put in to help the terrorists help the CTs instead. So two things they put into the original Nuke to help the terrorists were you could run through the vents instead of crawling like 1.6, and there was secret, that outside entrance that goes down instead of having to go right through the garage like you had to in 1.6 and then down a back alley, which is why almost no one ever went down those stairs. Now, what did Secret end up doing? It ended up becoming somewhere where the CTs, Get Right famously, for example, could just come up and shoot you from behind there. It ended up being something where running through the vents is something that allowed now CTs to instantly rotate to the bottom side, not even have to take any time. So these things ended up, in the end, in the metagame, working to the CT's advantage. So you can't do it, and it hasn't worked in this version either. I mean, the lower site stuff at the moment seems to help the terrorists. I'll give them credit for that. The toxic room that's different now, the new room that opens at the back, the fact you can't come out of two vents. But I can see a world where if this map's played enough, that will become CT-sided. What will happen is CTs will play more defensively in the ramp room, maybe one guy spotting and falling back, and then you'll go down quickly to the lower site, and you'll already have people on the bottom part of the lower site hiding in those spots that the terrorists use now for their advantage to then fuck up the other guys, so that someone will peek out the door, so you're fighting him, and then the guy shoots you from the toxic. Whatever it might be, I can see how these things in the future might even work towards the CT's advantage if they adapt to how the map's played. I mean, that was one of the things they literally said when they released the map. They said the main goals of this competitive overhaul and rebuild of the map were to improve gameplay by providing the terrorist team with more tactical options and to visually upgrade the map to a higher quality, etc. We set out to adjust rotation times between the stacked bomb sites, counter-terrorist strategic control of the rafters, and added a new outdoor attack route. Now, most of that stuff, they didn't succeed if those were their goals and that's what they were trying to do. They did in the sense that they put that extra walkway around. There's another area I can see CTs improving. In the future, I think teams scout the outside yard area more, and when those teams are playing that super slow waiting to execute on the inside or the ramp room, now you have teams boosting up to the top of the rock in a way that they wouldn't have been able to in the other versions. So I think there's all sorts of issues here that aren't as easily addressed by Valve in this particular sense, and in one massive overhaul out of nowhere. And they said they did it with community feedback via forum posts, video analysis, and email was instrumental to gathering a wealth of potential changes and insightful suggestions. I don't know anyone who contributed some good suggestions, or any top pros who said they were consulted and gave good feedback that ended up working out. I don't know of any of this being the case, so I don't know what they're doing in that sense. Anyone can just say that without any kind of proof, right? Now, I will say, in terms of the process of introducing it, that despite the fact I think the process is bad, I will agree. I think that actually, when they added in the new version of Train, which was in, I mean, that was got to be like April or May of 2015, maybe late April, maybe May, maybe early May. I think it was maybe early May. I will give them credit, Train actually did end up being better than the old version of Nuke. Now that I've seen it played out enough, now that it's happened, etc., in the end, I think it was good enough in that sense. Now, Overpass and Cobblestone, when they were added initially, which was at ESL 1 Clone 2014, I actually think in the end they became good, but only with the rehauls. The original of Cobblestone was a fucking terrible map. I even think the modern Cobblestone still needs work. It's still my number one. The two maps I always put forward that should be replaced is Dust 2 or Cobblestone, and they each have their own reasons that I've gone into in past videos. Key point is, initially, Cobblestone and Overpass weren't good either, though. And they also should never have been forced on us at a major, as they were at ESL One Cologne 2014. That drastically changed the outcome of that major, and it didn't give NIP a legit major win in the way every other major was won legit in terms of play. They definitely had an advantage from this bullshit aspect of the map randomizer twice, and then the fact that no one liked this map. They should have added Nuke. I'll give them credit here in a different manner. They added it after the first major of this year, which was Columbus. They added it in 22nd of April, and obviously the major ended like early April, so at least fair play in terms of adding it in that particular sense. And interestingly enough, actually in January 25th of 2015, a few months after the map was introduced to ESL Cologne, which is obviously August of 2014, there was actually a petition along the lines of people saying Nuke sucks now, which was open to petition to Valve to remove Cobblestone from the map pool. Now, Cobblestone itself was actually reworked about 2 weeks later and released February 6th, 2015. And obviously that version of Cobblestone later became embraced as the year went on, at least. People initially were scared it was the same map, and eventually did become a decent enough map, and at times a good map, depending on who's playing it. Now, I actually think one of the problems here, aside from how they introduced the maps, which I think is certainly an issue, and I'll talk about in a second, is the way they tweak the maps. Where they take a map away, they completely rework it, then they give us it back, and we just have to be stuck with that again. So it's either or. I don't think it should be. I think what they should do is they should bring in a map and they should apply a gradual series of changes every 2 to 3 months to the map, small ones, to see how that affects the map and see if we can make the map better. And not necessarily doing those changes to specifically counter, like, oh, terrorists are winning too much here. That's a meta game of how teams play, and those aspects themselves will change over history, as we've seen with Cash, which hasn't had any changes, but has repeatedly changed which side it was and which sites were dominant to go to, etc. Don't change it in that sense. Just change it to be a better map. Change some of the problems, like, oh, on this one site, you can attack it too easily and always attack that, like on Cobblestone, for example. Make small tweaks, like they did with the stairs, even though I'm not convinced that's been a good tweak yet, but that sort of a small tweak. Make it over a few months span so we still have enough tournaments to play it out and see what happens with it. And also, in doing so, you will show a level of commitment to wanting the map to be viable. You'll show that you're working with the community, working with the pro scene, that you're trying to make these maps better, and so that they are viable, and then you can move on to the other maps and work with them. Also, consult the community, despite the fact they claim to there. I don't know any key figures who say they've been consulted. Now, I can think of some names off the top of my head right now who I've seen videos from or heard comments from or talked to about maps in the past who all have good ideas about maps. So a really obvious one to start with for me would be Dazed. I think he had some great ideas about what you should have changed on Inferno, etc. Admittedly, he's a banned player, so Valve probably wouldn't speak to him. But okay, how about this player? Adren. I've seen tons of videos. He had videos about the old Nuke. He's had videos about Inferno, I think. Good suggestions as to what you can change. Sean Gares is someone who has a lot of experience in the community, knows how to articulate himself. Carrigan is a very reflective player who wouldn't just change things based on his own bias, I think, in terms of what would help Astralis. Pronax is someone, again, very fair player, very reasonable, very rational player. I think these guys would all give good suggestions and be able to vet some of the potential changes you're making and give you maybe at least a sounding board to bounce ideas off. Do they consult these people? As far as I know, no. I also think the approach for how you release them is key. I think they should release these maps to coincide with when there's a run of a couple of smaller events. So either lesser teams or just smaller events. So it's like a couple of good teams, like a CEVO Season 9, for example. And then let those teams vet out the map, let those teams change it out, let people watch their demos, then let it gradually get introduced into the pro scene. I even had a separate idea where if Valve really wants to make the tournament pool awesome and they want to add in more community feedback and they want to show us how to play the map, here's a cool idea. Have a one-off tournament every year where you're going to introduce a new map for that tournament. You release the map 2 weeks before this tournament, and this tournament is only played on that map. And what happens is teams play in a best of one, whatever. It can be double elimination if you want to have a different format, and you try to get a mixture of teams, some elite teams, some okay teams, some low-level teams, and you're only going to play that map. It's best of one, double elimination, and it's only on whatever, Nuke 3.0, Inferno 3.0, whatever the map's going to be called. And the whole thing is then put a decent prize pool for the winner or something. Now teams are going to practice, they're going to find out, and within that one tournament we'll get an interesting early meta which people can then work with, and then we can get faster adaptation of these maps. This map being adopted sooner, people seeing the weaknesses and the strengths of the map and the different opponents on that map, and it'll quickly sort out the pick ban as well. That's just a throwaway idea, but I think Valve could definitely do it. It wouldn't cost a lot of money. They could even make it a 4-team exhibition tournament with the best teams if they want, and that way make the prize money sick and fly them out to Valve offices, talk to them between maps about I mean, there's loads of ways you can go with this. I think it's pretty obvious, but right now, for me, Nuke is just a waste of a pick, it's a waste of a ban, it's a waste of a fucking map to be played, it's a waste of a slot that could have been Inferno or another map, and right now, it's just a waste, and I don't like the approach to how it's been included.